Hey guys, this is Smithy. Welcome to my channel. Today's video is a very different one, I would say. I'm going to create like my custom palettes inspired by the Natasha Denona Retro Glam palette and the Makeup by Mario Ethereal Eyes palette. I'm going to concise it a little bit. For example, the Makeup by Mario Ethereal Eyes palette is like a 12 pan eyeshadow palette, and I'm going to make it like a 9 pan eyeshadow palette. And similarly with Natasha Denona Retro Glam, which is like a 15 pan eyeshadow palette, I'm going to concise it to 12 pan and show you my version of it. I have basically customized all my Colourpop eyeshadow palettes that I already had. For example, let me show you a spoiler alert. I redesigned my Going Coconuts palette to the Makeup by Mario's Ethereal Eyes palette, and I took some like creative liberties to showcase this palette in like my perfect way. So if you're interested, let's begin. Let's start off with the Natasha Denona Retro Glam palette. Now I'll pop up a picture of the actual Natasha Denona Retro Glam palette on the side, and I'll show you how I am customizing it into like a 12 pan eyeshadow palette, and I'll show you the shades as well as the swatches and how everything looks inside the palette. Now I'm using my At Forest site by Raw Beauty Christie. I love that these palettes are like all magnetized, so I can like move around my shadows, and this really helps me when I'm not buying every new release from the market. I can customize it into my color story inspired by that palette so that I do not have to like run around and buy it. I really love doing that. If you are interested in seeing more of these kind of videos, do let me know in the comment section below or give it a thumbs up so that I know that you are interested. So without further ado, let's move on. Now, as you can see from the Natasha Denona Retro Glam palette, this palette is heavily on like a green side, like a sagey green side with pops of pink thrown here and there, and that's exactly what I wanted to do, but just make it a little more of like a concise and a solid color story. Let's begin. The first shadow, I took it from the Child palette, the Mandalorian palette, this one, the Child palette, and the shade that I use is called Right Hand Mando. Now this is definitely like my inner corner shade in this palette, and this is like a very light sagey green shade. So let's watch that. And this is such a beautiful like quality eyeshadow, so definitely wanted to use that as my inner corner shade. So that would be like my first shade in the palette. So let's pop that in right there. The next shadow that I'm gonna use is like a mid-tone pink shade, or it can act like a everyday smoky eye also, and for that I chose this shade, and this is from my It's My Pleasure eyeshadow palette, the purple palette. Do you remember that? And this shade is called Fan Fiction. So let's watch that. Definitely on the deeper side, but I feel like with the sagey greens it will go really well right there. So let's pop that too. The next shadow, definitely I wanted like a nudie pink shade for my crease, and for that I use this shade, and this is called Old Growth from the At Forest side palette. Like my perfect transitioning shade, I would say. Definitely wanted to use that, so let's watch that. There you go. Beautiful shadows. Now the last shade in the first row is a mossy, sagey, like the deepening shade of the palette. And this is the shade that we are going to put it. And this is from the Child palette. And this is called Float Your Crib. As you can see, definitely like a deeper, neutral, leaning towards more like cool tone shade. So let's watch that. There you go. And that's the first row swatched for you guys. Why am I wearing a blazer? I don't know. Especially when I have to swatch all these things. Let's move on to the second row. The second row is another deepening shade, but definitely if you want to create like a simple pink leaning look in this palette, I definitely wanted to give you like a burgundy brown shade or a little bit more of like a neutral brown shade, but leaning towards a little more on like the warmer side, I would say. So I chose this, and this is another shade from the Child palette, and this is called Droid Protocol. As you can see, this definitely has like a little bit of warmth in it, so I definitely wanted to use this. In her palette, the deeper shades are all like shimmer shades, so When I am taking that liberty of creating a palette, I definitely wanted that to be like leaning towards matte shade. So that's why I took this. And this can deepen up any look. So really, really, really love that. Now the next shade in the palette is another sagey green shimmer shade, but in the mid-tone family, I would say. And this is another shade from the Child palette. And this is called Sipping Soup. And you'll see how different it is from the first shade that we swatched. So let's swatch that. There you go. Now, as you can see, the first shade is definitely more on the lighter tone side, mainly for like the inner corner or like brightening shade. And this definitely has a little bit of warmth in it. Let's move on to the next shade. The next shade, I wanted to include like a deeper, a mid-tone pinky shimmer shade, just the same way Natasha has in her palette. And I feel like that is like a standout shade in that palette. So I definitely want to include one from here. And this is a little bit more deeper, but very, very dimensional. And this is from the Hocus Pocus Gather Round Sisters palette. And this shade is called Tis Firm. So let's swatch this. I feel like this with sagey greens would be really, really pretty. I'm placing the shadows inside the palette as we talk. And I'll show you the entire palette once we finish swatching. Let's pull this up. And this is how the Tis Firm shade looks. Now the last shade is another like a transition crease shade, but for like the greens. I definitely wanted like a neutral transitioning shade, but with a hint of green in it. So I chose this shade, and this is from the So Jaded palette, and the shade is called Geodude. Very, very beautiful shade, especially for transition. So let's watch that. There you go. Now let's move on to the last four shades. The first shade, I definitely wanted more of like a subdued, pinky, cool tone, neutral shade, but in a shimmer format, just because I feel like she definitely needed that kind of a shimmer in her palette. But she does have a lighter shimmer in that chroma crystal format, but it's leaning more champagne-y. I feel like if it is a leaning little more on like the mauvey pinky side, I feel like that would be perfect. And for that, I use another shade from So Jaded, and this is the shade called Smoky Quartz. So let's watch that. I love this shade. Absolutely love this shade. There you go. Really, really dimensional shadow. The next shadow, I wanted a deeper shimmer shade. Similar to what Natasha has in her palette, the two shades that are very, very similar to each other. I wanted one shade to look very similar, just for like smoky eye looks. So I used this shade from another Hocus Pocus Gather Round Sisters palette. And this shade is called Goodbye Cruel World. So let's watch this. There you go. Really, really beautiful for like a smoky eye look. Really pretty. And especially paired with that sagey greens or those pinks would be really, really pretty. Or you can go more on the neutral side by pairing it with the shade right next to it. The next shade in the palette is like a mid-tone sagey green shade. I feel like this shade is missing in our palette. And this shade is from another shade from the Mandalorian palette, the Child palette. And this is like a matte with like shimmer running throughout it. I would have loved if it is more of a matte shade, but this works. Definitely on the eyes, it looks more on the matter side. And this is the Child palette's shade called Little Frog. So let's watch that. There you go. And the last shade in the palette is a deepening shade, a cool toned, deepened black and charcoal brown shade. And this shade is another shade from the So Jaded palette, and the shade is called Stoned. So let's watch this. This definitely can replace like a black shade in the palette. It's more like a charcoal black, I would say. So this is the entire palette swatched for you guys, which I feel like it's definitely giving that retro glam effect, at least on the hand. And I have used this shadow on my eyes too, and I feel I do not have like time to use this palette on my eyes. But if you want like a get ready with me using this palette, do let me know in the comment section below. But I feel like this definitely satisfies retro glam palette. Now let me show you the palette, how it looks all together. Doesn't it give the retro glam vibes? I really feel it does. I hope that this video was helpful for you guys. And if you do have these like Colourpop palettes or other single shadows that are magnetizable, I feel like you can definitely get like similar vibes. And this definitely helps me not to buy the retro glam palette, just because I know that one, I'm not big of a green person, and if I have these shades in the palette, I definitely can wipe the similar looks that I could get from the retro glam palette. But since this is like my version of the retro glam palette, I'm gonna call this as the retro dance palette. I love love creating names and love curating palettes. That's my thing. So this is the retro dance palette. Now let's move on to the Ethereal Dream palette, which is inspired by the Ethereal Eyes palette from Makeup by Mario. Now again, this is more of like a 9-pan color story, a solid color story that I have been now using this for days for my office looks, and I've loved the looks that I've created using this palette. So I cannot wait to show you guys how this palette swatches. So I basically wanted to create like a neutral color story, just the same way Mario has in his Ethereal Eyes palette. But I feel like everybody who's going gaga over those glittery, toppery, shimmery shades, you definitely can get the same vibes from the Urban Decay Moon Dust eyeshadow palette or from the Colourpop Super Shock shadows. I feel like the effect is so very similar. So I wanted to create a similar kind of a color story, but with like my spin on it, just to make it a little more versatile. So let's begin swatching. Since the palette is already formed in front of you guys, I'm just going to swatch it so that you know each and every shade. How does that mean? So the first shade in the palette here is from the Going Coconuts palette, which is the same palette that I use. A lot of these shades, the neutral shades, are from the Going Coconuts palette. So this one is the Going Coconuts Shelia shade. So let's watch that. I feel like I can do nothing with my left hand, but I'm gonna try. So this is Shelia shade, and this is more of like a mauvey brown, like a pinky brown shade that I absolutely love for my everyday crease shade. What will I do? What will you do, Smithy, if you do not have your right hand? I have no idea. Okay, I have no pressure with my left hand. So this is the first shade swatched for you guys. Again, this is Going Coconuts Shelia shade. Let's move on to the next shade. The next shade is also from Going Coconuts palette, this one. And this shade is called Cocoa Crush, which was right in the middle shade. I love this shade. So let's watch this. And I feel like this shade is very similar to the Makeup by Mario palette shade. More of like a rose gold shade, but with so much of dimension. You're doing a terrible job. Terrible job swatching. So that's the second shade. If I'm going for a look that is leaning more towards pinky tone, I definitely use these shades. Really pretty. Now, if you're going for like a warm tone look, I feel the next shade, this one, is very necessary. It's more of like a peachy shade in the palette. So let's watch that. And this is from So Jaded, and the shade is called You're a Gem. So let's watch that. There you go. Now the next shade in the palette, I feel like can achieve that glossy look that everybody is looking for. And this is another shade from the So Jaded palette, and the shade is called Diamond, and this is more of a Super Shock formula, which I feel like is absolutely required if I'm duping the Makeup by Mario Ethereal Eyes palette. So let's watch that. And you can see like the effect is so similar. Look at that. It has like a transparent base, but it shines in the light so much, like giving that glossy effect. Really love that one. This is the shade that I have like tapped on, like the lightened effect, the glittery effect that you see here in the crease, the inner part of the crease, is all this So Jaded palette shade, which is in the shade Diamonds. Okay, the next shade is like a neutral but deepening red tone brown shade, and this is another shade from the So Jaded palette, and the shade is called Jasper. So let's watch that. Again, I feel like for like a warm toned deepening shade, we definitely need this shade, and I love this shade. Like a red and brown shade, I would say. Look how beautiful that is. Now, if I'm making like a palette, a neutral palette, I definitely do not only want like champagnes and like rose goldy shades. I definitely want to lean a little more on the golden side, and to complement that one green that I've put in this palette, I definitely wanted this shade. And this is another shade from the Mandalorian palette from Colourpop, and the shade is called Force. So let's watch that. This also has like that glittery duochrome effect, which I feel like this would complement this palette really well and give that glossy look on the eyes. So this is the shade Force from the Mandalorian, the Child palette. Can you even see? I feel like I'm twisting my wrist in so many different angles so that you can see it. Definitely has like a duochrome effect. It has that reddish base to it. Really pretty. Let's move on to the final three shades. The next shade is like a cool tone neutral brown, I would say. And this shade is another shade from the Going Coconuts palette, and the shade is called Nutty. So let's watch that. And you'll definitely see the undertone difference. Can you see that? Definitely more on the cool tone side, or can be considered as a neutral too. Really pretty. The next shade is also from the Going Coconuts palette, this one, and actually it is in this place that it is supposed to be, and this is called the Cocoa. So let's watch that. Definitely wanted like a deeper shimmer shade, very similar to the shade that is there in the Makeup by Mario palette, like a cool tone bronzy shade. Really pretty. And the last shade in the palette, I wanted to put like a green so that it can go in like the, I feel like that would go so well with this matte shade or with this shimmer shade. So I definitely want to include this. Even with this shimmer shade, it'll be really pretty. So let's watch that. And this is actually from the Hocus Pocus Gather Round Sisters palette, and the shade is called Bewitched. So let's watch that. There you go. And that is like my version of the Ethereal Ice palette from Makeup by Mario, and I'm calling it the Ethereal Dream palette. And this is how the palette looks. Now let me show you both the palettes swatched. And both the palettes curated. Obviously the top one is the Retro Glam palette version of it, and this one is more of the Makeup by Mario Ethereal palette. I really hope that you love the version of the palettes that I created. If you did like this video, you know what to do. Do give it a thumbs up so that I know that you are interested in these kind of palettes. especially because of the new palettes releasing every day in the market. If you want to create like your color story in like more of a concise way, I'm here to help you out, and I'm here to help myself out so that I don't purchase everything that is coming in the market. I want to focus on the palettes that are unique to my collection, and I'm going to stick to that. But yes, that's all for today, guys. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you did like this video, you know what to do. Do give it a thumbs up, and also subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell so that you're notified every time that I post next. I generally upload 3 videos every single week, every Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Until next time, I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye, guys.